Imagine overhearing a conversation that shatters everything you thought you knew about your life. Your wife, the woman you trust, confesses to an affair with her boss, and to make it worse, she's pregnant. How far would you go for revenge? What if your whole world was about to change? Watch now to find out the shocking truth and the confrontation that will leave you speechless. Are you ready for the shocking twists ahead? Kevin sat in the quiet of the living room, the gentle hum of the air conditioner barely audible in the background. The house was unusually still. He glanced down at the open folder on his lap, his fingers lightly tracing over the contents. It was a stack of bills, papers, and a small stack of receipts from various stores. Yet something caught his attention, something he hadn't noticed before. A strange, familiar number appeared on a phone bill. The number was not his wife, Claire's, nor was it one of their children's. It wasn't even a close family friend. Kevin's heart rate quickened, and his eyes narrowed as he read the name associated with the number. It was someone he had never heard of, Ethan Walker. Who is Ethan Walker? Kevin muttered to himself, his mind racing. His thoughts immediately turned to the worst. He knew his wife had been acting differently lately, distracted, distant. But this felt like a betrayal in its purest form. Was it an affair? No, that couldn't be right. But as he stared at the name printed in black ink, a chill crept down his spine. His mind started to race, his pulse quickening with every passing second. Kevin leaned back in his chair, trying to steady himself. He couldn't jump to conclusions, he thought. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe this Ethan Walker was just a colleague, a client, someone with no real significance. But as the thought lingered in his mind, a knot began to form in his stomach. His hand moved without thought, reaching for his phone. He couldn't just sit here, wondering. He had to know the truth. Kevin quickly dialed Claire's phone number, his thumb trembling against the screen. It rang, and then, on the third ring, her voice came through, as calm and collected as ever. "Hey, honey, how's everything?" Claire's voice was warm, but there was something off about it, something Kevin couldn't place. "Who is Ethan Walker?" The words slipped out before he could stop them. His voice was sharp, and he could feel the coldness of the question as it hung in the air. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, a silence that spoke volumes. Kevin could hear Claire's breath, shallow but steady. She hesitated. "Why are you asking about him?" she finally replied, her tone defensive but controlled. Kevin swallowed hard. The words felt like they were stuck in his throat. "I found the name on a phone bill. I need to know who he is." There was another pause, and then finally Claire spoke, her voice cracking slightly. "He's just a colleague, Kevin. I told you about him before." Kevin clenched his jaw, the tension in his chest growing tighter. "I don't remember you ever mentioning him. What's going on, Claire?" Another silence. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice faltering. "I swear, Kevin, it's nothing." Kevin wasn't sure whether he believed her. Something in her voice didn't sound right, like she was trying too hard to convince him. His mind raced with questions, doubts, and a sinking feeling in his stomach. "I need to see you," Kevin said, his voice low. "Right now." "I'm busy, Kevin," Claire replied quickly. "Can it wait?" "No, it can't," Kevin shot back, his heart pounding. He didn't know what he expected to find when he saw her, but something deep inside him told him it was time for the truth. He ended the call abruptly, his hands shaking. He stared down at the phone, his breath heavy. He felt a mix of anger, confusion, and fear all at once. There was no way he was letting this go. He had to find out who Ethan Walker was. Kevin stood up from the chair, his mind made up. His world felt like it was closing in on him, the walls pressing down with every unanswered question. Was this the beginning of the end for him and Claire? Was she hiding something? Was this the tipping point of a betrayal he had never imagined? His phone buzzed again, a message from Claire. He opened it quickly, his eyes scanning the text. "I'll explain everything when I get home. Please trust me." But Kevin didn't feel the slightest bit of trust. His suspicion had been planted, and now it was all-consuming. He was no longer in the dark. The truth was out there, and he would find it, no matter the cost. Kevin couldn't sit still. His fingers drummed against the counter, a mix of anxiety and anger bubbling inside him. The weight of what he'd discovered, of what he was about to uncover, pressed on him with each passing moment. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. And now, he had to find out exactly what. Claire's words were still fresh in his mind. "I'll explain everything when I get home." But he knew better than to just wait. Kevin wasn't a passive man. He wasn't going to let this go. If she wasn't going to give him answers, he'd find them on his own. His first instinct was to look through Claire's things, to search her phone, her emails, anything that could give him the answers he needed. But he hesitated. He loved her, or at least he thought he did. This wasn't just about spying, it was about the fear that his entire world might crumble, the trust they had built over the years, now teetering on the edge of destruction. Kevin paced the room, the floor creaking beneath him. He grabbed his phone and stared at it for a moment, his thumb hovering over the screen. The message Claire had sent him burned into his mind. "Please trust me." Could he? No, not yet. He couldn't trust her, at least not until he knew the truth. His eyes landed on the phone bill again, the one with Ethan Walker's name. He couldn't let that go. Kevin wasn't sure what he was looking for exactly, but he had to dig deeper. He dialed the number, his hand trembling as the phone rang in his ear. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but calm. Kevin's heart raced. "Who is this?" The man didn't hesitate. "This is Ethan Walker. Who's calling?" Kevin's mind spun. So this was him. The man who had taken up space in his wife's life. The stranger who had somehow become connected to Claire. Kevin swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. "I'm Kevin, Claire's husband," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "I found your number on a bill. Can you tell me who you are and why you've been in contact with my wife?" There was a pause. Then Ethan spoke, his tone cool but professional. "I understand your concern, but Claire and I only work together. We've been working on a project for the last few months. That's all it is, really." Kevin's mind reeled. A work colleague? The answer felt too rehearsed, too easy, but something in his gut told him to keep pushing. "Claire never mentioned you," Kevin said, his voice tight. "I don't understand. Why wouldn't she mention you?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't know what she's told you, but we've only been in contact for business. That's all." Kevin clenched his jaw. This wasn't adding up. "I'll be speaking to her soon," Kevin said, his voice low. "But I need to know more. I'm not going to just forget about this." Ethan didn't respond. He simply hung up, leaving Kevin with more questions than answers. Kevin's pulse raced. He needed to dig deeper. This man was too calm, too composed. Kevin was sure there was more to the story, and if Claire wasn't going to give him the truth, he would find it himself. He decided to visit Claire's workplace. If she wasn't going to tell him, maybe someone else would. He knew where she worked, the marketing firm downtown. It was a place she'd mentioned often, but until now he had never felt the need to investigate it. But now, it was the only lead he had. Kevin arrived at the office building and parked in the lot. His hands were cold as he gripped the steering wheel, unsure of what he might find. He tried to steady his thoughts, to focus. What was he hoping to uncover? Proof? An answer? Or perhaps just the confirmation of his worst fears? He stepped out of the car, his shoes tapping against the pavement. The building loomed ahead, glass windows reflecting the sky. Kevin's breath hitched as he walked toward the entrance. Every step felt heavier than the last. Inside, the receptionist greeted him with a smile, but it faded when she saw the tension in his posture. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but cautious. "I'm here to see Claire Foster," Kevin said, trying to keep his voice calm. "She's my wife. Is she available?" The receptionist's eyes flickered with something. Concern? Surprise? It was hard to tell. "I'm afraid she's in a meeting right now," she replied. "Can I take a message?" Kevin didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing. He wanted to press further, to find some way to get past the receptionist and into Claire's office, but he knew that would only raise suspicion. He had to be careful. "I'll wait," Kevin said finally, his voice calm. He wasn't going to leave until he saw her, not this time. The receptionist nodded and went back to her work, leaving Kevin to sit in the lobby. He looked around, his gaze drifting over the faces of the other employees, all busy with their own tasks. But in the back of his mind, one question burned. Where was Claire? What was she really doing here? Minutes passed like hours. Kevin's thoughts grew more frantic with each passing moment. Finally, the elevator doors opened and Claire stepped out, her expression unreadable. She didn't seem surprised to see him, but there was a hint of tension in her eyes, something that wasn't there before. "Kevin," she said softly, "what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," Kevin said, his voice low but firm. "Right now." Kevin stood there in the office lobby, his heart pounding in his chest. Claire had just stepped off the elevator, her gaze meeting his, but there was something different about her now. The warmth he once felt in her eyes had been replaced by a cool distance. It was as if she was already preparing for the storm. "Claire," Kevin said, his voice tight with frustration, "I need to talk to you, now." Her eyes flickered briefly, then she nodded, almost reluctantly. "Let's go to my office," she said, her voice subdued. She turned without waiting for him to respond, and he followed, his mind racing with questions. They walked through the sterile hallways of the office building, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Kevin could barely breathe. Everything he had suspected, every gut feeling telling him something was wrong, had led him to this moment. And yet, it felt as though he was walking into a trap. Claire's office door swung open and she stepped inside, motioning for him to sit. He hesitated, standing in the doorway trying to read her face. What was she hiding? What had she been keeping from him? He stepped inside, his anger simmering just below the surface. "What is going on, Claire?" His voice cracked with emotion. "I found the number. I spoke to Ethan. He says you two are working together, but you've never mentioned him before. Why?" Claire didn't immediately respond. She sat at her desk, her fingers drumming nervously against the wood. Kevin could see the tension in her posture, the way her eyes darted around the room as though looking for an escape. His breath hitched. This wasn't just about work. This was something more. "Kevin?" she began, her voice low. She paused, as if weighing her words. "I didn't want you to worry. This project, it's confidential. I couldn't tell you about Ethan because it wasn't something I was supposed to mention." Kevin clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. "Confidential? Since when have we kept secrets from each other, Claire? Since when is it okay for you to hide things like this? You've never acted like this before." She flinched at his words, but there was no apology in her eyes, no remorse. Only the same guarded look that had been creeping in over the past few months. "I didn't want you to think—" Claire started, but Kevin cut her off. "Think what, Claire?" he demanded, his voice rising. "That you're hiding something? That you're cheating on me?" His words were sharp, biting, and he couldn't stop them. The suspicion he had buried deep inside him was now flooding to the surface. "You've been distant. You've been secretive. And now, this?" Claire's face paled, and Kevin saw the flash of hurt in her eyes. But there was something else, something he couldn't quite place. It was as if she wasn't just upset by his accusations, but by something else entirely. "Kevin, please," Claire whispered. "It's not what you think." Her words were soft, but they only fueled his anger. "Then tell me what it is, Claire. What is going on? Why didn't you tell me about this guy, about Ethan, about anything?" For a moment, there was only silence between them. Claire's gaze dropped to the desk, her fingers twisting together, and Kevin could see the weight of guilt in her posture. She wasn't looking at him now, but Kevin could feel the walls between them growing higher, thicker. "Claire," he said, his voice a little softer but still full of desperation. "I don't understand. Why didn't you just tell me?" She took a deep breath, her eyes finally meeting his. "I was trying to protect you," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "But now I see that maybe I've only made it worse." Kevin stared at her, the words sinking in slowly. "Protect him? From what?" "Protect me from what?" he repeated, his mind racing. He had never seen her like this. She was falling apart in front of him, and yet the distance between them seemed insurmountable. Claire's face crumpled, and for the first time in months, she looked like the woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with everything. Her voice broke as she spoke. "I didn't want you to know about Ethan because I was afraid of what it would do to you, to us." She took a shaky breath. "I didn't want you to know that we've been working together on more than just the project. I didn't want you to know that Ethan, he's been helping me with something else, something personal." Kevin's heart skipped a beat. What was she saying? Was she admitting to something more than just an affair? His chest tightened as he tried to process her words. "Personal?" Kevin's voice was hoarse now, his anger giving way to confusion. "What do you mean, personal? What could be so personal that you couldn't tell me? You're my wife, Claire. We're supposed to share everything." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. The silence between them was suffocating. Kevin couldn't look away from her, his gaze locked on her face as he tried to piece together what she was saying. Finally, Claire spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been struggling, Kevin. I've been going through something, and I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to burden you. I didn't want you to think I was weak. But Ethan, he's been there for me. And I don't know how to explain it, but it's more than just work." Kevin's mind spun. There was something in the way she spoke, in the way she looked at him now, that made him feel like he was losing her. Her words were meant to explain, but they only raised more questions. "I don't know what to believe anymore," Kevin said quietly, the frustration and sadness creeping into his voice. "I want to believe you, Claire. I want to understand, but I don't know if I can." She reached across the desk, her hand trembling as she touched his. "Kevin, please. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you." His heart ached, but the anger and confusion still gripped him tightly. He pulled his hand away. "I don't know if I can do this," Kevin said, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire's face crumpled, her tears falling freely now. "Please, Kevin, don't leave me." But Kevin wasn't sure anymore if he could stay. The truth, whatever it was more painful than he had ever imagined. The next few days passed in a blur. Kevin barely spoke to Claire, each conversation strained and filled with unspoken tension. He had retreated into himself, trying to make sense of everything. The betrayal, the secrets, the raw emotion that had spilled out between them, it was all too much. He didn't know where to start, or if there was any point in trying to fix what had been broken. But deep down, he couldn't just walk away. The love they had shared, the years they had spent together, it was too much to let go without a fight. It was Saturday morning when Kevin decided to do something. He couldn't stay locked in the house anymore, trapped in his thoughts. He had to face it, face her, and face the truth. He needed to decide what came next, not just for his marriage, but for himself. Claire had been quiet since the confrontation in her office. Kevin had seen the guilt in her eyes, heard the desperation in her voice. He wanted to believe her, but the betrayal stung like nothing he had ever felt before. Ethan. The name lingered in his mind like a shadow, casting doubt over every word Claire had said. Kevin grabbed his jacket and left the house, heading to the park. He needed to clear his head, to breathe. The cool air felt refreshing against his skin, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere at home. He walked slowly, taking in the quiet beauty of the park, the trees rustling in the breeze. But even in the serenity, his mind couldn't settle. He was angry, confused, and heartbroken. But underneath all of it, there was a small flicker of hope. It was fragile, but it was there. He didn't want to give up on Claire, not yet. As he sat on a bench, lost in thought, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. It was Claire. He hesitated, staring at the screen for a moment before answering. "Kevin," her voice came through, tentative, unsure. "I know you need space, but I can't keep waiting. I don't want to lose you." The words hit him harder than he expected. He had known that she loved him, but hearing her say it out loud, so raw and vulnerable, made something inside him shift. "I don't know if I can trust you, Claire," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to move past this." There was a long pause on the other end. He could hear her breathing, steady but full of emotion. "I understand," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to make this right, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix it. I'll go to therapy. I'll be open with you. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I love you. I want us to get through this, Kevin. I want to fight for us." Kevin closed his eyes, the weight of her words sinking in. He could hear the sincerity in her voice, feel the desperation that clung to her words. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. This wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick, but maybe it was worth it. "I'm not sure what I need right now, Claire," he said slowly. "But I can't just pretend like everything is fine. I need time. Time to figure out if I can trust you again, if we can rebuild what we had." "I understand," she whispered. "Take all the time you need. Just don't give up on me, Kevin." The conversation ended, but Kevin didn't feel the relief he had hoped for. There was no instant solution, no magic words that could make everything better. But he knew one thing for sure. They were both willing to fight, and that was more than he had expected. Over the next few weeks, Kevin and Claire took small steps toward healing. They attended therapy together, though Kevin still found it hard to fully open up. Every time Claire spoke, every time she shared something from her past, he felt a tug of suspicion, a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. But he also saw the effort she was putting in, the vulnerability she had never shown before. There were still days when Kevin wanted to walk away, to turn his back and leave the pain behind. But then he would see Claire's face, her quiet determination, and he would remember the love they had shared. And slowly, little by little, things started to change. One evening, after another tense therapy session, Kevin came home to find Claire waiting for him. She was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying, but there was something different about her now. She looked at him with such tenderness, such sincerity, that it almost took his breath away. "I know I've hurt you, Kevin," she said softly, "but I promise you I'll never make the same mistake again. I'll prove to you every day how much you mean to me." Kevin stood there, torn between the anger that still lingered and the love that refused to die. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, Claire," he said quietly, "but I want to try. I want to see if we can rebuild." Her face lit up with hope, but she didn't reach for him, didn't rush forward. She just sat there, waiting, giving him space. It was the first time in a long while that Kevin didn't feel rushed, didn't feel pressured to make a decision. For the first time in weeks, he felt like there was a path forward. It wasn't clear, and it wasn't easy, but it was there. And maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. The road ahead was uncertain, full of challenges and setbacks, but for the first time in a long while, Kevin felt the flicker of hope inside him grow stronger. Maybe recovery wasn't impossible after all. Kevin had spent the last few days in a fog, his mind swirling with doubts and questions. He thought he was getting somewhere with Claire. He thought they were on the road to recovery, but there was still something he couldn't shake. There were pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit, things that didn't add up, and he couldn't stop thinking about them. He had tried to trust her, to believe that their marriage could be salvaged, but there was a nagging feeling deep inside that kept him from fully letting go. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the truth came crashing down on him. He had been sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, when an unexpected message popped up. It was from an old friend of his, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "Kevin," the message began, "I hope you're doing well. I know this is out of the blue, but I heard something recently that I think you should know. It's about Claire. You might want to hear it from me." Kevin's heart stopped. His fingers hovered over the screen, and for a moment he couldn't bring himself to read more. He had been hoping for peace, for things to settle between him and Claire, but now it felt like the world was crumbling all over again. His thumb finally moved, tapping on the screen to open the message. The next few sentences were like a punch to the gut. "I don't know if you're aware, but Claire has been seeing someone else. I didn't want to get involved, but I thought you should know. It's been going on for a while. Please don't tell her I reached out. I just thought you had the right to know." The words blurred in front of Kevin's eyes. He reread the message several times, as if somehow, if he read it enough, it would start to make sense. But it didn't. The truth, the raw, gut-wrenching truth, hit him like a freight train. Claire had been lying to him, again. Kevin felt his stomach twist in a way he hadn't felt before, as if the very ground beneath him was shifting. His mind raced, trying to process the information, trying to make sense of it. Was it true? Was this just another lie? He needed answers, but he didn't know where to turn. His hands trembled as he grabbed his phone, dialing Claire's number. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to confront her, and he had to do it now. When Claire picked up, her voice sounded different, as if she was already on edge. "Kevin?" she said cautiously. "What's going on?" The anger, the betrayal, it all came rushing to the surface. "What's going on? You tell me, Claire." Kevin's voice cracked, the pain evident in every syllable. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me about this other person, about your affair?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Kevin could hear Claire breathing, as if she was trying to gather her thoughts, trying to find the words to explain. Kevin, Claire's voice trembled. "It's not what you think. I never wanted you to find out like this." "No, Claire," Kevin cut her off, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "It's exactly what I think. You lied to me. You kept this from me, and now you've gone behind my back again." "I didn't want to hurt you," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was scared, Kevin. I didn't know how to tell you the truth." "The truth?" Kevin spat, his voice rising with every word. "You've been hiding the truth from me for months, Claire. How long has this been going on? How long have you been seeing him? Was I just the fool who didn't notice?" There was a long silence, and for a moment Kevin thought she might hang up. But then Claire spoke, her voice heavy with regret. "It wasn't like that," she said, her words faltering. "I never meant for it to happen. But it did, Kevin. I fell in love with him, and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know what to do." Kevin felt his chest tighten. It was as if everything inside him was collapsing in on itself. He had tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, tried to believe that they could move forward. But now, this was something he couldn't come back from. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had built a life with, had betrayed him in the most devastating way possible. "So what now, Claire?" Kevin's voice was low, dangerously calm. "What do you want me to do with this? Do you expect me to just forgive you again? To pretend like this is some misunderstanding?" "No!" Claire's voice was desperate now. "Please, Kevin, I don't want to lose you. I love you. I've always loved you. But I was weak, and I made a huge mistake. I don't know how to fix it, but I will do anything to make it right." Kevin felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly overtaken by a crushing sense of sorrow. He didn't know what to do with the pain he felt. He didn't know how to process the fact that the woman he had loved for so long had not only betrayed him, but had also fallen in love with someone else. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Claire," Kevin said, his voice breaking. "I don't know if I can keep living in this lie. I don't know if I can keep pretending everything's okay." "I'll do anything, Kevin," Claire pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'll fight for us. I'll show you that I can be the woman you need. Just, please don't give up on me." Kevin stood there in silence, staring out the window, trying to make sense of it all. But the truth had already shattered everything. The foundation of their marriage had crumbled, and he wasn't sure if there was anything left worth saving. For the first time in a long while, Kevin felt the weight of the decision that lay ahead. There was no easy answer, no quick fix. The truth was ugly, and the path to healing seemed impossible. But one thing was certain, this wasn't the end. Not yet. Not until he figured out what he truly wanted and what he was willing to fight for. Kevin couldn't sleep. The weight of the decision hung heavily over him like a storm cloud, dark and oppressive. Every thought seemed to circle around Claire, her confession, her promises, the love she claimed to still have for him. But beneath it all, there was a gnawing emptiness. Something had been broken, and no amount of mending would ever make it whole again. He had spent days replaying their conversation in his mind, the words Claire had spoken, her desperation. "I'll do anything, Kevin. I'll fight for us." It echoed in his mind, but every time he thought of it, something deeper inside him stirred, a voice that told him he couldn't keep living this way, that even if Claire did everything she promised, even if she fought with all her might, there was no going back from this. Kevin had always believed in second chances. He had given them to Claire time and time again, but this time felt different. The betrayal ran deeper than anything he had ever experienced. He had loved her with everything he had, and she had shattered that love in ways he couldn't begin to fathom. Sitting in his car that evening, parked outside the house they had once built together, Kevin tried to calm the storm in his chest. His hand gripped the steering wheel as his mind raced. He had always been the kind of person who sought clarity in the silence, but now there was only noise. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was Claire, a text message. "Kevin, please, can we talk? I need you to know I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can to fix this." He stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, his thumb hovering over the screen. Part of him wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that love could still survive after everything that had happened. But the other part of him, the part that had been hurt too many times, knew that this was the breaking point. With a deep sigh, Kevin set the phone down. He couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't keep pretending, but still a part of him hesitated. The familiar pull of their past together, the memories, the laughter, the moments when they were so sure of each other, it all swirled around him. Was he really ready to walk away from it all? Could he really throw away everything they had built? The sound of footsteps outside broke his reverie. Kevin looked up to see Claire standing at the front door, her face pale, her eyes swollen. She looked smaller than he remembered, fragile in a way that only made his heart ache more. She had been the love of his life, and now it felt like he was looking at a stranger. She walked toward the car, and when she reached the door, she hesitated before speaking. "Kevin, Stop." His voice was sharp, more forceful than he intended, but it was the only way to cut through the rising emotions. "I don't want to hear it right now. I need space." Claire looked as if he had struck her, her face falling. "Kevin, please. I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry. I love you. I can't lose you." The sincerity in her voice wavered, but Kevin couldn't ignore the pang of guilt that washed over him. He didn't want to hurt her. He never had. But there was a difference between love and a lifetime of lies. He needed to make a choice, and the decision couldn't wait any longer. He opened the car door, stepping out to face her. There was no more room for indecision. It was time to confront the truth of what they were, and what they were never going to be again. "Claire," Kevin began, his voice steady but filled with a deep sadness, "I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can keep fighting for something that might not even be there. The trust is gone, the love I had for you. It's not the same. I don't know if it ever can be." Claire's face crumpled, her eyes welling with tears. "But I love you, Kevin. Please, don't do this." "Love isn't enough anymore," he said softly, his own voice breaking for the first time. "I gave you everything I had, and you gave me this." His words hung in the air like poison, bitter and final. "I can't keep living in this limbo, Claire. I can't keep hoping things will change. This has gone on long enough." Claire fell silent, the weight of his words settling between them like a heavy shroud. She looked at him as if searching for any sign that he might change his mind. But Kevin knew what he had to do. There was no more space for hope, no more room for what-ifs. The damage had been done, and it wasn't just hers to fix. "I'm sorry," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant for it to end like this." Kevin took a step back, his heart breaking with each word that left her lips. But there was no turning back now. He had already made his decision. "I know," he said quietly, "but I can't keep doing this, Claire. I can't keep living in a relationship that's built on lies. I'm done." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Claire stood there, her head bowed, tears streaming down her face. Kevin felt a sharp pang in his chest, but it wasn't enough to change his mind. His heart was heavy, but his decision was final. "I'm leaving," he said, his voice firm. "I'm going to find my own way. I need to move on, and you need to do the same." Claire didn't respond, her face a mask of grief and regret. Kevin turned away, his footsteps slow but deliberate. The sound of his footsteps faded as he walked toward the car. As he drove away, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief, mixed with the emptiness that only came from losing something, or someone, he thought he would never have to let go of. The decision had been made. The chapter of his life with Claire had come to an end, and now, for the first time in a long while, Kevin had the chance to rebuild, to reclaim what had been lost, to find his way back to who he was before all of this. But the road ahead was still uncertain. The truth had set him free, but it had also left him with nothing but questions. What came next?